My name is Richard. I'm 72 years old and I've seen a lot in this life, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I heard the day my hearing returned. Have you ever wondered what people would say about you? If they thought you couldn't hear? Well, I heard. And what my own daughter said was as if someone had erased everything I had ever built with her. It is strange how silence sometimes reveals more than words. For 3 weeks, I lived in a silent world. After an accident near my home in Billings, Montana, I suddenly lost my hearing. Amanda, my eldest daughter, came to live with me with her husband, saying she wanted to take care of me. At first, I believed it was love, but over time, it started to smell like something else. This video is about what I found out when my hearing came back, and I decided not to tell anyone. You will understand how silence can be a weapon and how he can also save a soul. Because there are words that we never forget, and there are silences that say it all. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. The first phrase I heard when my hearing came back was not, "I'm glad you're better," nor a simple, "I love you." It was something much worse. A dry, dirty comment made as if I were an old piece of furniture left in a corner of the house, and it came from the mouth of my own daughter. That broke me, but it also woke me up. From then on, I knew I couldn't trust what I saw anymore, only in what I heard, and especially in what she thought I didn't hear. So if you've ever been silenced, left aside, or have ever felt that someone close to you has taken advantage of your fragility, so maybe this story is yours too. And if it is, stay with me until the end. It leaves me a sign that I'm not alone in this feeling. A like, an inscription, a comment saying, "Me too," because remembering that still hurts. But sharing with those who understand makes everything lighter, and maybe together we can transform this pain into strength, because there are truths that are only told once. And today, this is the time. The sound came like a breath, a little beep in the office, and suddenly, everything, the tick of the clock on the wall, the voice of Dr. Patel saying, "Mr. Richard, congratulations," the zipper of the lab coat being closed. It was like waking up from a strange and mute dream. I didn't cry there, but I felt my eyes heavy. The hearing had returned. He explained calmly, said that it was an inflammation caused by the pressure of the bang in the neighboring work. "Something rare but reversible," he said. I could only thank you with my head. On the way back home, I drove slowly. I didn't turn on the radio. I wanted to hear the world again. The tires on the asphalt, the wind coming in through the crack in the window, the crack of my knee when braking. Everything seemed new and old to me at the same time. Life spoke to me again, and that's exactly why I decided not to tell anyone. At least, not yet. Something in me said that I needed to listen more, to really listen. When I walked in the front door, I pretended I was still in the same state. Amanda was in the kitchen with her back turned, talking to Derek, who was sitting on the counter playing with his cell phone. They didn't see me right away, and that's when it all happened. "Tell Dr. Foster that he's the same way. A few more days, and we get that interdiction report. We just need to show that he doesn't understand anything anymore." Derek replied with a laugh through his nose. "Perfect. The broker said it may list the house next week, and if we sell it for that price, we can already think about the change." "To Portland?" Amanda asked. "Yes, new life, without the old." Old. I stood on the doorstep of the room, not breathing. They didn't see me. My heart was beating loudly, as if I was going to give myself away. Amanda was there, drinking the coffee I bought, under the roof I built with Margaret, my wife, and already making plans to get rid of me. It was not concern that brought her, it was interest. I went to the couch and sat down as if I hadn't heard anything. I pretended to look for something in the exam folder. Amanda came next with that trained smile. "How was it, Dad? Did everything go well?" I signaled that I didn't understand. I pointed to my ear. She nodded with false pity in her eyes. "It's okay. Let's try, right?" There, at that moment, I knew. They were acting like I was one step away from disappearing. It was at that moment that a thought crossed me. How does someone become a hindrance to the one they loved the most? How does a father who has given up so much end up being treated as an obstacle? Forgive me for the pause. But if you've ever been through something similar, if you've ever been left aside by those who should protect you, comment below with a "I've lived it," or just a "It's true," because that kind of pain, it should not be silent. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat there, listening to every word said in the hallway, every whisper in disguise. Amanda talking to her sister on the phone, saying that she couldn't take care of a dead weight anymore. Derek complaining about the musty smell of the house, saying he wanted to renovate everything before selling, and I, in the dark, understanding that my house was no longer mine. My place, my presence, my name were already being erased. But in that moment of feigned silence, I made a pact with myself. If they wanted to play this game, I would play it too. But by my rules. The hearing had returned, and with it, my lucidity, my dignity. But what I heard the next day, it was even worse. Do you know what she said to the doctor on the phone? You won't believe it. The next day, I started paying more attention to the details, not only in what they said, but in the way they moved near me. Amanda, for example, started to speak more slowly, as if I had also lost my mind. I used notepads to write down simple things, such as "take a shower today" or "drink water." I wrote in large letters, drawn as if I were a kindergarten student. And when I read too fast, she would say, "Look, Dad, you're having a good day, right?" Like I had constant bad days. Derek, on the other hand, began to treat me as if I were a nuisance who needed an agenda. "Do you want dinner at 5 or 6 a.m., Richard?" he asked loudly, as if I were deaf and silly at the same time. I just smiled and pointed out any time. The game had become theater, and I was the main character. But they didn't know that I was also the author. Gradually, Amanda began to introduce the subject of modern nursing home. He called it a senior community. He spoke with rehearsed sweetness. "You know, Dad, there is a beautiful place in Missoula, with a heated pool, cinema, even library. You'd have friends your age, and fresh food every day." She pretended to be concerned about my well-being, but between the lines screamed, "I want your house, your bill, and your absence." I pretended to forget the conversations. I returned to the same subject as if I were confused. I said that I had already had lunch when I didn't have one. I asked what day it was. Amanda wrote everything down. "He doesn't remember anything anymore, Derek. It's getting harder and harder," he once said on the phone, thinking I was sleeping on the couch. And even so, I was still there, silent. It was not weakness. It was calculation. My head, trained by decades of engineering, began to assemble a map, a timeline. Every phrase, every gesture, every step of that staging entered my internal archive. Amanda wanted something bigger than just getting rid of me. She was building a case. He wanted to record evidence that I was incapable. It was preparing the ground for a request for curatorship or even legal interdiction. All it took was a doctor friend, like Dr. Foster's, and that's it. She would have access to my account, to the house, and the power to decide everything for me. Derek, always smiling and passive, seemed to just go with the flow. But behind the scenes, I could see his movements. One day, I saw him taking pictures of the house, the living room, the kitchen, even my bedroom, while Amanda pretended to go to the supermarket. "They're just for the record, in case we renovate here one day," he said, when he noticed me looking. I nodded as if I didn't understand, but I understood everything. They tested my limits. Sometimes they left the microwave on to see if I reacted. Others set the house alarm to go off and pretended it was unintentional. When I didn't react, they exchanged looks. I don't think he's really listening. It was at this point that I understood. Their staging was dangerous. And if I missed a gesture, if I blurted out a yes when I should have pretended not to have understood, My whole plan could go down the drain. But I also knew how to act. Gradually, I began to anticipate myself. He purposely left things out of place, pretended to forget where he had kept his coat, made notes on the fridge with wrong dates. Amanda recorded everything with contained excitement. I began to see notebooks and binders on her desk, with labels such as behavior, memory, decline. It was a complete report on me, and even so I kept going. Silence, disguise, observation. It was not revenge, it was protection. Until one day after dinner, I heard Amanda whisper something that made me freeze. If he doesn't have any crisis by next week, we can provoke something light. Nothing much, just to reinforce to the doctor the picture he needs to see. That was the limit. They weren't just waiting for my downfall, they were planning to push. But what she didn't know, it's just that I was ready too, and I had already marked my next step. Do you want to know with whom? You'll find out now. Because the next morning, I made a call, and this connection, everything changed. That morning, even before the sun broke through the Montana sky, I got up earlier than usual. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the closed closet in front of me. A simple closet made of old wood, where I keep not only my clothes, but parts of my history. The silence of the house was still pure, clean, as if time had stopped. Amanda and Derek slept upstairs, unaware that at that moment I was starting to remember everything. Not what was forgotten, but of what was ignored. I got up, opened the closet door, and pulled out a cardboard box full of folders. It was the kind of thing they thought was useless, but inside was the proof of everything I had ever been for her. I started with the college papers. I remembered the day Amanda received her acceptance letter in Boulder. She was crying with joy, and I cried too, in secret, when I signed the registration check. It was almost $20,000. Then came the student loans, which she swore she would pay off herself. He never paid. I paid it all off. I kept the receipts. They were there. Then I found the bank statements with transfers made in 2011, when her first marriage imploded. Dad, if I don't pay off these cards, I'm going to lose my name. I helped, without asking, without charging. Then, in 2015, when Derek came up with that crazy idea of opening a trucker-themed cafe, I was the one who signed on as a guarantor. He said that Truck and Toast was going to be a hit with young travelers. The business went bankrupt within 6 months, and I paid the debt so as not to see my daughter sink with it. In a separate envelope, there were pictures of her as a little girl, with her little hands dirty with paint at school, running around in the yard with the old dog she called Captain. Margaret took these photos. Records of love, she would say. Amanda smiled at them. A clean, whole smile. Where did that smile go? I held one of the letters she wrote me as a teenager. Dad, thank you for listening to me. You're the only one who understands me. I love you. I read it in silence, as if I were reading someone else's words. It was hard to believe that that girl became the woman who looks at me today with impatience, who talks about me as if I were a burden. And then the memory of a night that I have never forgotten came to me. Amanda, already an adult, divorced, devastated, knocked on the door of my house at midnight. He cried non-stop. Dad, I don't have anyone else. Only you. I opened the door. I gave her a blanket, made tea, and stayed up all night while she slept on the couch. The next day, I called Margaret, who was traveling, and said, "She needs us." Margaret was always firmer. "She needs to grow up, Richard. You treat her like a queen, but she sees you as a servant." At the time, he didn't want to listen. I thought it was bitterness. But now I understood. Margaret saw what I refused to see. All this generosity, all this help, everything turned against me. As if by doing so much I had become disposable. I was the father who solved everything. Now it was the old man who got in the way. The worst of all is that if Amanda had asked me for help again, I would have given it. If she had said, "Dad, I'm struggling. I need the house," I would have thought, talked, found a way. But no, she chose to lie, manipulate, plan my exit as if I were a problem to be eliminated. And it was there, sitting on the floor of the room, surrounded by receipts, memories, and heartaches, that I felt something I had never felt before in relation to my daughter. Disgust. Not the child Amanda, not the Amanda I hugged so many times, but of this adult, cold Amanda, who planned to snatch me out of her own house in silence. I put everything back, every role, every photo, every proof of what I was, because now I knew who she was. And that same day, I decided to do something that would change the course of everything. I needed to protect what was mine, not only the house, but my history, my name, my peace. And for that, I needed someone who had helped me before. Do you remember the name Andrew Coleman? Well, it was him I called, and you won't believe what he told me when he answered. When Andrew answered the phone and heard my voice, he was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Richard, I thought you weren't listening anymore." I laughed, but it was a dry laugh. I replied, "Yes, my friend, I listened again, and I need your help again." Andrew Coleman had been my lawyer for almost 20 years, retired but still lucid as a razor. He was the one who helped me when I sold part of the northern lands and who took care of the inventory when Margaret left. A decent, honest man, and above all, loyal. I told him what was happening. I didn't omit anything. He said he was pretending not to hear, that he was being treated like an incapacitated old man, that Amanda and her husband were moving to take everything. Andrew listened in silence. In the end, he said, "Richard, what you need now is proof and a plan. Let's get started." I hung up with a lump in my throat and a certainty in my chest. I wasn't as alone as it seemed. But inside that house, I still felt trapped. It was the house that Margaret and I built, brick by brick. Every corner had our story. The kitchen wall still had the mark of the ruler where we measured the children growing up. The back garden had the rose bush she planted on our 30th anniversary. And now, all that was the stage of a dirty theatre. Amanda started to change my routine in a subtle way. Without consulting me, he changed my medicines. He started giving me pills out of the bottle, saying, "It's the same as always, Dad." He changed the time of meals. He served me portions that were too small, and when I asked if I could repeat it, I pretended not to understand. "You've already eaten, remember?" Derek, on the other hand, was on a different pace. He walked around the house with a tape measure, measuring walls. "If we open here, we can make an open concept, kitchen integrated into the living room. It becomes modern. It becomes modern." He said this by running his hand over the wall that Margaret painted with her bare hands, where she pasted photos of us, wrote dates with a fine brush. That was not reform. It was erasure. One afternoon, pretending to doze off in my chair, I overheard Amanda explaining on the phone that she had already moved the address of some of the mail to the Portland apartment she and Derek hadn't even rented yet. "To expedite the transition," she said. Transition, as if I were a piece of furniture, an object that over time moves, boxes, and dispatches. The feeling that took over me was not anger. It was something deeper, a mixture of emptiness and incredulity. How does one turn one's father's house into a trap? There, every corner that was once coziness became a threat. The silence of the night seemed to carry hidden voices. I felt watched all the time. The doorbell that rang in the morning, the noise of the cell phone vibrating in the kitchen, the footsteps on the stairs. It all seemed to be part of something I still couldn't fully see. And even so, I smiled, pretended, and he wrote everything down. And look, if you've been here until now, listening to me open my heart like this, leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel, because I still have a lot of things in store to tell you. Sometimes we just need someone to listen to without judging, and telling this story is giving me a kind of strength that I thought I no longer had. But that feeling of imprisonment inside my own house, it was going to get worse. Because days later I found something in the trash of Amanda's office, a document that I wasn't supposed to see, and when I read what was written there, I understood her true plan, and that's when I stopped waiting, and I started to act. Do you know what was on that paper? I'll tell you, but first I need you to take a deep breath with me, because that hurt. When I found that document in the trash in Amanda's office, I felt my hands tremble like they hadn't since the day I buried Margaret. It was a draft request for interdiction. A draft, incomplete, but clear enough for anyone to understand the plan, to declare that I was not in a cognitive position to take care of myself. It was written my full name, my address, the false description of episodes of severe confusion, mild aggressiveness, constant forgetfulness, and even a pencil note that read, "Ask Dr. Foster to sign after the evaluation." They wanted to erase me from life itself while I was still breathing. I closed my eyes and felt that document weigh like lead in my hand. I returned to the living room in slow steps, sat in the old armchair where Margaret embroidered on cold winter nights. And it was there that I said to myself, enough. No more pretending I don't see, no more accepting crumbs, no more letting my own daughter treat me as a problem to be solved. The armchair still smelled like her, that light lavender scent she wore back when our lives were still simple. I felt a warm tear come down, but it wasn't just sadness. It was something firmer, heavier. It was the decision that was missing. I wasn't going to wait for them to push me into an asylum. I was not going to accept that they erased my history as if it were dust on an old piece of furniture. I had lived too much, worked too much, fought too much to let someone take away from me what I built brick by brick. I pulled out my wallet, pulled out Andrew Coleman's card, and spent some time just looking at his name, an old friend, a man I knew my whole life. I dialed the number. He answered the third call. "Richard, is everything okay?" His voice seemed worried, as if he already knew something serious had happened. I took a deep breath and said, "Andrew, I need to talk to you. It needs to be tomorrow." He didn't ask why. He only replied, "Tomorrow, at 9 in the morning, and be strong." I hung up the phone and felt a weight leave my back. But along with relief came clarity. From that day on, I would no longer be just an observer of one's own ruin. I would be the architect of my return. I began to think about the plan calmly, as I had done when I was still working as an engineer. First, identify the problem. Then, find the flaws. Finally, build the solution accurately. I decided that I would change my will. Amanda would be withdrawn completely, with the exception of a symbolic amount as a lesson. The rest would go to Eric, my youngest son, who despite the distance has always been honest with me. Then I would disconnect Amanda from accounts, authorizations, passwords. Everything would be redone, everything would be protected, and in the meantime I had to keep pretending. Then, that same night, I started leaving clues in the opposite direction of what Amanda expected. For example, I took all the medicines at the right time, without hesitation. She noticed. I saw the astonishment in her eyes when she saw me putting the jar back in exactly the same place, as if something there had gone off script. I also started talking to myself, but on purpose. In a low voice, simple things like, "Tomorrow I need to water the plants," or "Where did I keep that blue coat?" Amanda passed in the hallway and watched me with her eyes off. She wanted to see confusion, but I was seeing organization. I wanted to see weakness, but I was seeing firmness. Another thing I did was check my own documents. I waited until they left for the supermarket and went to the desk where I keep old contracts. I checked every signature, every paper, every password. Everything that was mine came back to my control. I kept what was important in a folder hidden inside an old Margaret suitcase, a suitcase that Amanda didn't have the courage to touch. And as I performed each of these small actions, something inside me changed. Suddenly I was no longer the cornered man listening to conversations through the cracks. It was someone who was digging a tunnel to escape the emotional prison where my daughter was trying to put me. A silent but firm tunnel. I knew that for Amanda any sudden improvement would be a reason for distrust. So I kept the pace. I acted carefully, with patience, with strategy. I couldn't show that I was rediscovering my own strengths, at least not yet. That night, before I went to sleep, I looked up at the ceiling and felt a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was as if Margaret's voice spoke to me, quietly. "Now you see, Richard. Now you're waking up." I closed my eyes and imagined what would happen when I went to the meeting with Andrew the next day. What would Amanda's face look like when she realized that the roles had changed hands? How would she react when she found out that I wasn't the helpless man she imagined she controlled? And I tell you, this image alone in my mind gave me the strength to face the next day. But what I couldn't imagine is that, even before I left to meet Andrew, something would happen in that house. Something that would change the course of my plan. Something I would never have foreseen, because that morning, Amanda came into my room earlier than usual, and what she said, to this day it echoes inside me. I woke up before the sun. The house was still in darkness, and all you could hear was the sound of the heater starting to work. I got up slowly, put on my shoes, grabbed my briefcase and the coat that Margaret sewed on the lining for me on a Christmas many years ago. It was going to Bozeman, 2 hours from Billings. I chose this destination precisely because Amanda would never suspect it. She thought I could barely cross the street without help. When I arrived at the garage, Amanda was waiting for me at the kitchen door with a cup of coffee in her hand. Her eyes no longer carried the same subtle falsehood as before. They were more calculating, colder. "Are you going to leave today, Dad?" he asked, as if only complying with protocol. I nodded and made a vague gesture that it was just an exam. She did not insist. He only replied with an "okay, take care" that seemed more like, "come back soon so I can continue my plan." The road to Bozeman was quiet, with almost no traffic. I turned on the car's heater and left the radio off. I wanted to hear my own thoughts. I wanted to remember every detail of what I had experienced. The whispers, the looks exchanged between Amanda and Derek, the mean phrases they uttered thinking I was deaf. Andrew Coleman greeted me with the same sincere look as always, white hair, glasses slipping on his nose, and the same leather briefcase he had been wearing for decades. When he saw me, he got up and came to hug me. "Richard." From his tone on the phone, I imagined that heavy stuff was coming. I sat down slowly, took a deep breath and said everything. The manipulations, the remedies, the attempt at interdiction. I told how I heard my daughter's voice talking about selling the house and sending me away, how I pretended to be sick to collect evidence. I showed the pen drive with the recorded audios, conversations, whispers, shots, proof that everything she claimed to do for love was, in fact, part of a project of slow destruction. Andrew listened in silence. At times, he closed his eyes as if he wanted to absorb each word more carefully. When I finished, he didn't say, "That's absurd," nor, "I'm sorry." He just said, "We're going to protect you." We begin with the New Testament. Amanda would completely leave the inheritance. The property would be destined for Eric with shielded clauses. I also created an irrevocable clause that prevented Amanda from appealing to any post-mortem decision in court. Nothing would be left to interpretation. Then we recorded a video. Andrew put the camera on the tripod and asked me to speak looking straight into the lens. I introduced myself with my full name, date, city, and then in a firm voice I told them everything. I explained the reason for the change. I spoke of abuse, manipulation, coldness. He said that this decision was not out of anger. It was for justice, for dignity, because my story would not be buried with me. She'll understand exactly why. Andrew placed the video in the office safe, along with a copy of the will and the USB stick. Before we left, he looked at me with an expression that mixed respect and regret. "You're doing it right, Richard. No one should have to go through this at the end of their life. But who passes needs to get up." On the way home, the sky began to close. Low clouds, an icy wind cutting through the road. I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, I felt like control was coming back into my hands. And I want to tell you something now, looking right into your eyes. If I can imagine your face there, on the other side of this screen, no matter how much we age, no matter how much the world tries to silence who we are, there is still strength within us. There is still choice. And what will happen from now on, my friend? You'll want to see it to the end. When I parked the car in the driveway, I closed my eyes for a second. The engine still hot, the smell of leather from the seat, the steady breathing. But when I opened the door of the house, something was different. The silence inside was not the same. And what I found on my desk, it was no coincidence. Someone had messed with my papers, but the worst, someone had figured out that I was listening. And now, the game changed sides again. The garage door was still creaking when I noticed the detail on the living room table. One of my notebooks was out of place. It was an old notebook with a leather cover, where I usually write down the household bills, loose ideas, memories that I still want to leave for Eric one day. But that notebook I had left locked in the second drawer of the desk. And now it was there, open, with the pen next to it, as if it had been consulted. I felt a shiver go up my spine. I went to the desk. The drawer was closed, yes, but without the safety lock. Someone has been poking around where they shouldn't. I went straight up to Amanda's room. She and Derek had gone out to the grocery store, as they did almost every Saturday around 9. I knew I would have a maximum of 40 minutes until they returned. I approached her computer, a brand new silver laptop, one of those that synchronizes with everything: cloud, cell phone, watch. She used to be careful, but that day, perhaps because of the rush, she forgot to hang up. The screen flashed and lit up right on the desktop. I opened the email. I used the search field and typed Dr. Foster. It was like opening a door to hell. The first exchange was polite, formal, but in the following ones, confidence appeared. I saw an email with the subject, "Report as agreed." Amanda asked, in careful words, for a clinical position that allows the opening of guardianship based on episodes of disorientation, even if not yet formally diagnosed. Dr. Foster replied, "Let's talk in person. I know exactly what you need." I closed my eyes for a moment. That was no longer a worried daughter. She was a predatory daughter. I continued the search. I found a PDF called Final Portland Plan, and when I opened it, the blood ran cold. There were detailed financing spreadsheets, simulations of selling my house, profit projections, renovation costs, and even internal photos of the house that were clearly taken without my consent. From the kitchen, the living room, even my bedroom, my room. They were selling my life behind my back. In one of the emails to a broker, Amanda said, "He is in an advanced stage of confusion and has no opposition to the sale. We are only resolving legal issues." Wait, what do you mean I have no opposition? It was all lies. A lie constructed, maintained, watered with poison and fake smiles. At that moment, I squeezed the mouse so hard that I felt my fingers hurt. I never imagined that my daughter would be capable of this. Never. I carried her in my arms when she had a fever at the age of 8. I went to her graduation, took a picture with that ridiculous hat just to make her smile. I was the first to arrive at the hospital when she lost the baby, even before Derek. I went everything I could have been, and yet she chose to erase me. No. There is a time when we look around and realize that the people we created, they are no longer the same, that the love you gave doesn't come back, that it's not fair, it's not human, it's not easy to accept that. But sometimes, what hurts the most, it's knowing that you'd do it all over again, even knowing the ending. If you've ever felt that pinch of seeing someone you love turn against you, comment here to me with a simple, "I understand you," or "I know how it is." Because this pain, my friend, this pain is hard to carry alone. I closed the computer carefully. I didn't delete anything. I didn't print it. I didn't need to. Everything was already on my flash drive and Andrew's safe. But now, I had a clarity that cut me like a razor. That was no longer a hypothesis. It was a coup in progress. I went down the stairs slowly. I sat on the porch chair with my wool coat covering my shoulders and stared out over the yard. Margaret's rosebush was still there, firm, and in that instant she seemed stronger than ever. It was then that I heard the car parking. Amanda arrived with bags, hurried steps, light conversation with Derek. I got up, walked in the back door, and pretended I still lived in their theatre. But inside here, the role had already changed. And the next morning I would make the boldest decision of my life, because if she wanted to get me out of this house, so she had better get ready, because now I was the one who was going to leave first, but to leave the right way, and he wasn't going to leave alone. That night, Amanda made roast beef with mashed potatoes, one of Margaret's favorite dishes, curiously. The table was set more neatly than usual, cloth napkins folded and 2 candles lit in the center, as if this were a reconciliation dinner or a silent farewell. I sat in my usual place, the one at the end of the table, facing the garden window. Derek was on the left, Amanda on the right. The two talked quietly to each other, smiling. I pretended I didn't hear. I pretended that hearing was still a distant fog. But every word came in as clear as the sound of a bell. In the middle of dinner, she put down her fork slowly, wiped her lips with her napkin, and said softly, rehearsedly, "Dad, have you heard of Shady Pines?" I pretended to think. I frowned as if trying to decipher something forgotten. "Shady what?" She smiled, but her eyes didn't smile. "Shady Pines. It is a nursing home in Helena. Wonderful, green areas, specialized nurses. I thought maybe we could visit." I put the fork on the plate and looked right into her eyes. "Is it expensive?" Amanda froze. Derek paused in mid-motion, bringing the glass to his mouth. "Sorry?" she asked. "You talked about it yesterday too, didn't you? Or did I dream?" It took her a second longer than usual to respond. "I think I mentioned yes, but you were sleeping." I tilted my head. "Sometimes it feels like I'm hearing better." Amanda smiled again, but it was a smile that trembled around the edges. "That's great, Dad. I don't know. Maybe it's something in my head. Only once in a while, a few flashes. The tension in that room became so dense that you could cut it with the knife." Derek wiped the plate with the bread, avoiding looking at me. Amanda quickly changed the subject, talking about the weather, a new cake recipe, anything that could push that conversation under the towel. But there, in that simple, "Is it expensive?" I took the first step in the game that was now mine. After dinner, Amanda collected the dishes and went up to the room with her cell phone in hand. I waited about 20 minutes and went upstairs, slowly, in silence, as I had done so many times in the last few weeks. I heard her voice muffled through the closed door. "I need this report, Dr. Foster. Urgently. It is oscillating. Sometimes it seems more lucid." Oscillating. She wanted to run before I escaped her hands. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked out the window at the deserted street, the burning lamppost, the wind shaking the tree in front, and I thought, what am I going to do with all this pain? Because it wasn't just strategy. It was feeling. It was disappointment. It was a piece of me dying a little more with each lie. But something was born there too. A firmness that I thought I had lost with age. A strength that did not come from the body. It came from character. Because if they wanted to do it quietly, I was going to respond with silence too. But an intelligent, sharp silence, one of those that, when he speaks, knocks everything down. That night, I opened Margaret's suitcase and pulled out a new notebook. I began to write in my firm handwriting, page by page, everything that had happened since the accident. I put dates, names, phrases heard, reactions. That would be my written memory, my most powerful weapon. And as I was writing, I realized something important. It wasn't just for me that I was doing all this. It was for everyone who has been through situations like this, that they trusted too much. that they loved without reservation, that were left aside when they became slower, more fragile, older. The truth is that old age does not take away from us the right to be respected. And if you there on the other side of the screen have already felt this indignation growing in your chest, comment here with a "it's true" or "I agree," because sometimes we just need a sign that we are not alone on this road. I closed the notebook carefully and put it back in my suitcase. The next morning, before any step, I would call Andrew again. There was one more thing I wanted to do, one last piece that needed to enter the board before checkmate, and I knew exactly how. What Amanda didn't expect was that I still had allies, and one of them, it was closer than she imagined. The old hallway of the house, the same one where I ran after the children when they were little, had now become my silent battlefield. The wood creaked less at night, and there, leaning against the wall near the ventilation grill, I found a place where the sounds of the kitchen came clearer than any television turned on. I discovered this unintentionally on one of those days when I was hiding from the world and from myself. But after I realized how the voices were channeling there, the corridor became my trench. Amanda and Derek always spoke quietly when they were together in the kitchen. They believed it was safe, that the old man was locked in his room, perhaps sleeping, perhaps lost in his own thoughts. But I was there still, invisible, with my cell phone in my pocket, recording everything, and my hearing sharper than ever. It was one Friday night that I heard Amanda say, in that cold voice of someone who thinks the world revolves around one's convenience, "Dr. Foster said he can present a picture of progressive confusion. It doesn't need something too serious, just convincing." Derek replied with a sigh, "But what if he really gets better?" "He won't. And even if it improves, no one will believe it, even more so after the report. We need it now, Derek. I've already sent the papers to Portland. And let's be clear, Eric won't do anything. He lives in Seattle, barely speaks to his father. At most, he will sign what I tell him." I stood still. The blood boiled, but the body remained static. They thought I was defeated, erased, ready to be swept under the rug of their own history. And the worst, they were taking advantage of Eric's distance, his silence, as if that were disinterest. Amanda never understood Eric. She never understood that he did not move away out of coldness, but out of respect. He would call me, yes, sometimes late at night, and say, "Dad, I know Amanda is there. I don't want to interfere, but if you need me, just let me know." But I hadn't spoken yet. Still. With each sentence I heard there in the hallway, I became less of a victim and more of a judge. And each recording was a brick in the construction of my plan. I recorded 3 nights in a row. Conversations about false reports, about house values, even one in which Amanda said she could sell the furniture together. "Less work later," she said, "less work." As if the memory of my life were rubble. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes everything an old man like me needs, it is that someone listens. On the 4th night, I left the cell phone closer to the railing. I left the hallway and went to the garage. I fiddled with the tools as if I was looking for something. And when I returned, I heard another pearl coming out of my daughter's mouth. "He doesn't even ask about the bank anymore or the pension account. It's already accepted." Accepting. I was recording everything. Every phrase, every intonation, every word. I went back to the room, transferred the files to the security pen drive, and kept them in Margaret's suitcase, in the false bottom that she sewed herself a while ago when she was afraid of thieves in the neighborhood. Margaret, she would have cried, seeing what Amanda has become, but she would also have looked at me in that firm way of hers and said, "Richard, don't lower your head." And that's what I did. The next day, I texted Andrew. I just wrote, "I have more proof." "Date?" He replied within minutes, "Come tomorrow, bring it all." But what Amanda didn't know, and what Derek didn't even dream of, is that Eric was going to get into this story. in a way they didn't expect, because that same night I took courage and made the call that would change everything, and when Eric answered, I knew. The silent war was over. Now it was time to show who really commanded this board. I called Eric one late afternoon, when the light was coming through the stained glass window of the room and painting the floor red and orange. His number was still memorized, even though his fingers had hesitated before touching the screen. The last time he came here was last Christmas. He stayed only 2 days. He said that work was consuming everything, and I didn't want to charge. I was never good at demanding presence, only offering space. When he answered, I heard a noisy background. It sounded like a coffee shop. Dad, it's me, son. Do you have a minute? His silence on the other end of the phone weighed more than any words. Of course, always. I went straight to the point. I said I didn't want to worry, but I needed him to hear something. He said that I was fine physically, but that I had discovered things that required clarity, not anger. He tensed. Is it Amanda? Listen first. I sent one of the audios by message, the one of the conversation between her and Derek about the report. It didn't even take 2 minutes. When he got back on the line, his voice had changed. Dad, this is a crime. This is emotional abuse. This is unforgivable. I was silent for a few seconds. I know, but I don't want war, Eric. I don't want scandal. I want justice. I want her to understand what she did at the right time in the right way. Therefore, I need your calm, not your anger. He took a deep breath. Do you want me to go there? I want him to come on the weekend, as someone who only came to see his father. Bring that smile you used when you arrived with your broken skateboard. Let her think that everything is under control. And when she realizes she's not, it's going to be too late. It was then that he said a sentence that went through me like an arrow in the chest. You're not alone anymore, Dad. And look, I can't explain. But at that moment I felt something that I hadn't felt in a long time. A kind of support, you know, as if the weight began to split between 2 shoulders. Eric and I arranged everything. He would arrive on Saturday, spend the weekend. He would pretend that he came out of nostalgia, that he knew nothing, and would observe everything with attentive eyes. I already knew where each piece was. Now, with him by my side, the board was going to change. And I'll tell you something that may sound simple but carries a world. Sometimes what hurts the most is not betrayal. It's the feeling that you're going to have to face everything alone. And when that loneliness is broken, hope breathes again. If you've come this far with me, hold on tight, because what's ahead is the heart of this story. And trust me, you'll want to see how it all ends. On Saturday, when Amanda opened the door and saw Eric standing on the porch with a slight smile, she froze for 2 seconds. Only 2. But it was enough for me to know that, deep down, she already felt that something was out of place. But she didn't know yet that the weekend was going to turn the tide. Eric spent the whole weekend walking around the house with that look that only he has, quiet, observant, as if every corner told a story he didn't want to lose. His presence changed the air. Amanda noticed. He tried to disguise it, of course. It was too kind, too attentive, almost theatrical. He made waffles for breakfast, opened the wine he saved for Christmas, even ran his hand over my shoulders like someone who cares. But I knew. It was fear. Fear of losing what she thought was already hers. On Sunday morning, she came to me with an envelope in her hand. I said it was a new form from the health plan, which needed my signature for an appointment authorization. The pen was already covered, as if every second was precious. I took the paper and, by instinct, feigned reading difficulty. She pointed out where I should sign. Signed. But when she left, I went straight to the scanner that was hidden in the garage closet. I scanned the document and opened it on the old computer in the basement. The title read, Authorization of Permanent Legal Representation, Beginning of Guardianship Process. There, at that moment, something inside me broke for good. She didn't want to just push me to an asylum. She wanted to take over my life. At the end of that afternoon, I saw Amanda's car leave. I waited 30 minutes and called Eric. I showed everything, the scanned PDF, the changed bank passwords, which I was only able to access because luckily I still had one of the old cards with direct access to the app, and the email in which Amanda informed a real estate agent named Melissa that the residence is already in the management transfer phase. It was more than treason. It was inhumanity. Eric clenched his fist tightly. She crossed the line, Dad. This is not just a plan, it's execution. She's doing it, now. And that's why we're going to act, tonight. I knew that, from that point on, it was not enough to just defend myself. I needed to cut. That same night, Eric went out to buy pizza. Amanda stayed home with me and, as usual, asked if I wanted tea. I took my cup to the bedroom, closed the door, but I listened from the hallway. She made a quick call. He signed it. All right, we just need Dr. Foster to send the report by Wednesday. Then it's official. I went to sleep with my chest heavy, but my head steady. Tomorrow, it would be the day. And look, it's curious how we manage, even after being old, to discover a strength that we didn't even know still lived in us. But at that time, an old memory hit me. Margaret, the first Christmas we spent together, still young, eating cold sandwiches sitting on the floor because the table hadn't arrived. She looked at me and said, "Even when things are tight, Richard, promise that you won't let anyone erase who you are." That phrase stayed with me for decades, and now more than ever it made sense. Sometimes some memories are like anchors. They don't hold you back. They save you. If you have a memory like that, of those that held you back when the world wanted to bring you down, write it here in the comments. It can be just a phrase, a smell, a voice. I want to read it. We need to remind each other of what sustains us, because sometimes all we have, it is the memory of what we were, not to forget what we can still be. The next morning, Amanda called me into the office. He said he wanted to show me a spreadsheet of monthly costs. He sat next to me with his laptop open. I thought it would be good to make everything easier for you. Bank passwords, for example. Now they are with me. It's safer that way. I feigned surprise, but nodded. You've always been good with numbers. She smiled, satisfied. She was so sure of control that she no longer tried to hide it. And that's when she said, "The old lawyer has retired. I think we should look for another one. I can help if you want." I took a deep breath. "Of course, daughter, you know what's best." But inside, I had already called Andrew that morning. And what he prepared, Amanda would never have imagined. The plan was already in motion. And that night, it would be the first time that Amanda would have to hear, with her own ears, the sound of her own ambition coming back against her. That Tuesday night, as the wind whistled through the cracks in the kitchen window, I sat quietly, listening. The sound came through the ventilation, as always. Amanda was talking on the phone, and by the cadence and words chosen, it was clear to me who was on the other end of the line. Dr. Foster. She said that Friday would be perfect for an informal evaluation. Nothing too elaborate, just a quick visit. As if it were out of care, you know. Derek added, "It's just a matter of making it look like he's getting lost a little bit more every day. We already have his signature." My throat dried up. They were even preparing the day of judgment, a trial on the sly, where I would already enter as a defendant, convicted even before speaking. But what they didn't know was that the judge, it would be me. The next morning, I waited for Amanda to leave with the car to buy groceries. I called Andrew's office straight in. The secretary answered, and before she could say anything, I said, "Tell Mr. Coleman that Richard needs him urgently. This Friday will not be theirs, it will be mine." Less than 2 hours later, Andrew returned to me. We scheduled the meeting for Thursday afternoon, in his own office, in Bozeman. I would take the final audios, the scanned copy of the document of the attempted guardianship, the prints of the conversations with the broker, and a new letter, written in my own hand, with my emotional statement attached to the will. It was important to be clear. It was not revenge. It was protection. I also asked Eric to be present, but on one condition. He would stay in the waiting room. He would enter only at the right time as a witness. I wanted everything to be impeccable, clean, undeniable. The board was assembled. I spent the rest of that day checking every recording, every document. I kept it all in a black leather briefcase that Margaret gave me when I retired. She was beautiful, firm, discreet, just like her. And you know, as I put each paper in there, a memory crossed me. Margaret sitting in that same room, embroidering the welcome cushion of our home. She said that the house reflects the owner, and in that moment, I swore to myself that this house was not going to end up reflecting greed, lies, abuse. I was going to end up reflecting justice, because a house, when it loses respect, it becomes just a roof with walls. That night I had dinner with Amanda and Derek as if nothing was happening. I smiled, ate, praised the sauce. Amanda seemed lighter, as if she already felt victorious. "Friday will be good, Dad. Dr. Foster will come here quickly, just for a visit. You like him, remember?" "Yes, I remember, daughter." And inside, my soul laughed. Thursday dawned cloudy, as if heaven knew something was about to happen. I left early, saying I was going to cut my hair. I took the old car that was in the back garage, which Amanda never remembered existed. He was Margaret's old pet. It worked perfectly. I arrived in Bozeman shortly before noon. Andrew greeted me with that firm handshake I had always had for him. We went up to the reserved room, and when the door closed, everything began to take shape. He listened to the audios again. He saw the documents. He read my letter. Then he got up, walked to the window and said, looking at the horizon, "Richard, this is not only strong, it's definitive." We signed the new will with security clauses, a copy sent directly to the notary's office and another stored digitally, with date, time and video of validation. We also revoked the old one, with a signature in 3 copies. When everything was ready, Andrew called Eric. He entered quietly, but with his eyes full of something I only saw in him as a child, that mixture of admiration and anger. He hugged me tightly. "It's going to work out, Dad. It's already working, son." We returned to Billings at dusk. Amanda was already at home. He smiled when he saw us enter with bags. "Did you go shopping?" Eric replied. "Dad wanted to stop by some old shops." Amanda did not suspect it. She didn't know that the countdown was now hers. And as the kitchen clock struck 7:20, I went upstairs to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked around. Every photo on the wall, every piece of old wooden furniture, every mark on the floor. Everything was my story. And now all of this was about to be protected. But the game still needed one last move. Friday would be the day she would never forget. And I wonder, will she have the courage to keep the theater? When do you find out that all the curtains have already fallen? On Friday, I woke up before the sun. The house was still asleep, but my body was already awake. It was as if each cell knew that this would be the day. I got up slowly, put my feet on the cold wooden floor of the room, and sat there for a few minutes, listening to the silence. It was not just any silence. It was the kind of silence that precedes thunder. I went down the stairs calmly. The kettle was already on the stove, as if she also knew what awaited me. I sat in the kitchen in the corner where Margaret used to plant mint and waited. At 7:20, I heard footsteps. Amanda came down excitedly, dressed in a light blue blouse, hair up, light makeup. It was the type of production that she only used in 2 moments: job interviews or when she wanted to manipulate someone. "Good morning, Dad," she said, as if she were the most loving daughter in the world. "Today is an important day for us." "Is it?" I asked, without looking up from the teapot. "Yes, I prepared waffles. Remember how you liked them with strawberry syrup?" I sat at the table. She served my plate with a generosity that bordered on exaggeration. I smiled gently and pulled out my notepad. I wrote calmly, "I feel better. It must be the medicine." She read it, feigned surprise, and ran her hand over my shoulder. "That's great, Dad. But let's keep everything under control, okay? Derek entered the kitchen soon after. He carried his cell phone in his hand, muttering something about good angle of the room and photo of the outside area. "Is the ad going to come out yet?" I asked in a low voice, as if talking to myself. He froze for a second, then laughed nervously. "Nothing, sir. Just thinking about the future." The smell of coffee spread through the house. Amanda pretended to put the dishes away, but her eyes didn't stop. She wanted to see if I gave any sign of consciousness, and I did, but it was subtle. I prepared my own cup of tea, something that in the last few weeks I had purposely failed to do. While putting the sachet in the hot water, she sneaked up. "He has already forgotten that he took the medicine," I said slowly, my eyes fixed on the steam of the cup. "Maybe you're forgetting who's been in this house the longest." She stopped. His shoulders stiffened. His face, once smiling, hardened for 2 seconds. The first crack had appeared. She disguised it with a forced smile. "You're more lucid these days, aren't you, Dad? Sometimes lucidity comes back when we least expect it." The clock on the wall struck 9:48 a.m. 2 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Dr. Foster entered smiling, with his leather briefcase and clinical look. Amanda received him with enthusiasm, as if it were a business meeting. "Thank you for coming, Doctor. It's going to be quick." I sat at the table with my cup in my hands. When he greeted me, he just smiled. "Beautiful day for a visit, isn't it?" "Yes, sir." Amanda ushered us into the room. Derek closed the curtains. Everything seemed millimetrically rehearsed. Dr. Foster pulled up a chair. "Mr. Richard, I'm going to ask you a few simple questions, okay?" "Of course, Doctor. I'm curious to see what we find out together." Amanda turned pale. The questions began. Name, age, current date, president of the country. I answered everything in a firm voice. He took notes, sometimes looked at Amanda strangely. "And how do you feel about your daughter taking care of you?" "Care is good. But when they become bars, they stop being love." Amanda laughed nervously. "Dad, what nonsense." Dr. Foster stopped writing. "Mr. Richard, do you feel limited by your daughter or son-in-law?" I looked him in the eye. "You're here to find that out, aren't you?" The air in the room changed. Derek cleared his throat. Amanda began to walk around the room, restless. "Dad, I think you're tired. We can reschedule." "Doctor, could you please wait a moment?" Dr. Foster nodded. I got up from the armchair, walked to the desk in the corner of the room, and pulled out a small black box from inside the drawer. I handed it to the doctor. "Here are more answers than any report could write." Amanda ran up to me. "What is this?" "It's the sound of truth. I've recorded a good part of the conversations since my hearing came back." The silence that followed was absolute. Dr. Foster, visibly tense, opened the box. Inside, a pen drive with date tags. Amanda didn't know where to stick her hands. Derek retreated to the couch, and then, before she said anything, the front door opened again. Eric, with an envelope in his hands. The game was not over yet, but now the pieces were on display, and the next move would be definitive. Eric walked through the door, as if carrying the weight of a life in his hands. The white envelope he held seemed to glow against the shadow of what was about to happen. Amanda took 2 steps back when she saw him. Derek was silent, with the expression of someone who understood too late that the ground was beginning to disappear from under his feet. "Dad," Eric said, handing me the envelope firmly. I nodded and walked back to the center of the room, where Dr. Foster was still sitting, now restless. Amanda shook hands, as if trying to find some remnant of control in the situation. "Dr. Foster," I began calmly, "here are the documents that show the plans to sell this house, without my consent." I opened the envelope and handed the lawyer the drafts, printed emails, the conversations with the broker, the images taken secretly from the rooms. He looked at everything in silence. "And this," I continued, taking the flash drive off the table, "is the recordings, several, days and days of conversations between Amanda and Derek, about me, about how to get me out of here, about how you, with all due respect, would be used for that." Dr. Foster turned pale. He looked at Amanda, then at me. I was not aware of any of this. But she did. And that's what it's all about, Amanda exploded. This is manipulation. You're sick, Dad. You faked it. He pretended to be deaf. This is cruel. Cruel is plotting against someone inside the house you built with your own hands. Derek stood up angrily. This will have legal consequences. You can't record us without permission. Andrew Coleman, who until then had remained quiet in a corner of the room, finally spoke up. In fact, I can guarantee that everything here is legally supported, including this one. And he took out of the briefcase the new will, already filed, with the stamp of the Bozeman Registry Office. He handed Amanda a copy. She trembled. He opened it, read it quickly, and his eyes filled with tears. You cut me off from the inheritance? You will receive $1,000, symbolically, for the services rendered. But what did you try to do? Has no value. She slumped, sitting on the couch, her hands in her hair. He began to cry. You can't do this to me. I am your daughter. No, Amanda. My voice came out firm but without screaming. You were my daughter. What you've become, it was something else. The silence that followed was the heaviest of that entire journey, and yet it was a different silence, a silence that cleansed, that reorganized the air. You didn't just betray me as a father. You betrayed everything your mother and I believed in. You stepped on what we built together, in what I tried to teach with love, with effort. And now, you're going to get out of this house. Today. Amanda stood up slowly. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged, her pride shattered on the floor. Will you abandon me? No. You've abandoned yourself a long time ago. She looked at Eric as if asking for some help, some bridge, but he just averted his eyes. You crossed a line, Amanda. And I can't defend that. Dr. Foster collected his papers and left in silence. Derek, without further argument, went upstairs, probably to pack his bags. Amanda stood still for a while, as if she were trying to wake up from a nightmare. But that was not a dream. It was justice. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. As Amanda collected her last things and walked out the front door, I took a deep breath. There were no screams. There was no scandal. Just an old man standing, looking out the window with a firm heart and a peaceful soul. But there was something more. Something she didn't know. One last piece, one last truth that she would never expect. As Amanda and Derek began packing things, the sound of drawers being hastily opened, hangers being pulled angrily, took over the entire house. That same house that was once filled with childish laughter, the smell of bread in the oven, the sound of Margaret singing softly as she cleaned the yard. Now all that could be heard was the tinkling of broken intentions. Eric leaned against the doorframe of the room that was once his, staring without saying a word. He held his arms tightly as if trying to contain a mixture of shame and disbelief. They always seemed happy at the end of the year, didn't they, Dad? He said quietly, as if talking to himself. Rehearsed happiness, I replied. There are people who memorize the paper and look good on stage. But when the curtain falls... Amanda walked past us dragging a red suitcase, the same one I gave her as a gift when she went to college in Boulder. He didn't even look him in the eye. Derek came behind, trying to remove the old painting from the living room wall. This is a family painting, I said. Margaret offered me once. And then he said he regretted it. Go back to the place. He snorted, threw the house key on the floor, and muttered something I prefer not to repeat. Eric moved towards him, but I made a subtle gesture with my hand. It's not worth the energy. Amanda stopped at the door. She held a small box of her mother's jewelry. I opened my hand, asking for it back. She wanted this to stay with her daughter, not with you. For a second, her face trembled. The veneer of coldness cracked. The eyes sought mine, and for the first time in a long time, she looked like the Amanda from before, the one who cried on my lap at the age of 6 because she was afraid of the dark. You're going to die alone, Dad. The sentence came out as a cutting whisper, loaded with sorrow, perhaps despair. I replied quietly but firmly, "I prefer solitude to living with those who wish for my death in life." She closed her eyes for a second, turned her back and left. He did not say goodbye. He did not thank him. He did not even ask for forgiveness. I closed the door slowly. I heard their footsteps on the wooden porch, then on the gravel at the entrance. The car starting, and silence. That silence. It was different. It was the silence of the house breathing again. I sat in Margaret's armchair. I looked at the open windows, the wind swaying the curtains, and I felt that this was the end of one era, and perhaps the beginning of another. You know, there are times in life when we understand that losing someone is not the end. Sometimes it's just the universe clearing the way for us to live in peace. And if you've come this far with me, know the hardest part is over. But the most important one is yet to come. Eric walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "She's going to try to reverse that, Dad." "She can try," he nodded, "but you're no longer alone." I got up and went to the balcony. The sky was beginning to change color. It was late afternoon. The light hit the roof as it did on the day Margaret and I moved here, with the little children running around the garden. I closed my eyes for a moment. I took a deep breath, and then I remembered a letter, one that Margaret left before leaving, one that I never had the courage to open. But that day, something told me that the time had come. What did she know? That I had yet to figure out. The next morning, the sound of the wind coming in through the living room window sounded different. It was as if the house, now in true silence, was breathing with me. A clean silence, weightless, no pitfalls. I got up earlier than usual, made my black coffee and sat down with the hot cup in my hands, looking at the side of the table where Margaret used to sit. For the first time in a long time, I was able to smile. I took a cardboard box and collected everything Amanda had left behind. A scarf thrown on the stairs, a bottle of perfume in the bathroom, some old letters that she never returned to the closet where I kept them. Each object seemed laden with a what-if, but I had no more room for assumptions, just for truths. And the truth was that that house, which was once hers too, now needed to be just mine again. I changed the locks later that Saturday. I cancelled the joint accounts, updated the emergency contacts with Eric's name. I went back to signing my own name in the bank accounts, without interference, no doubt, without intermediaries. Then I went up to the attic where I hadn't set foot in years. There, among dusty boxes and dormant memories, I found one of the last frames Margaret prepared before she fell ill. It was a collage of photos. Me, her, the little kids playing in the backyard. The trip to Yellowstone, Christmas 1989. Everything there, frozen in time. I went down with the frame in my arms, as if carrying a piece of soul, and hung it on the wall of the living room. I took out the cold paintings that Amanda had put up, generic images of the beach, of the city, and returned to that house, its faces, its essence, its history. And something curious happened. As I redesigned that space with true memories, the sounds of the house changed. The creaking of the floor, once annoying, now sounded like an ancient laugh echoing. The ticking of the clock on the wall, which so often gave me insomnia, now marked a time that belonged to me again. I went back to walking in the park where Margaret and I used to go for our walks on Sundays. The trees looked the same, but the benches were more worn. Still, everything there welcomed me. I greeted Mr. Albright, who still feeds the same old biscuits to the squirrels, and Mrs. Henley, who asked me, smiling, "You're gone, Richard. Problems?" "No," I replied. "Now, solutions." There was an hour, sitting there on the bench, with the sun warming my knees and the sound of birds cutting the air, that I closed my eyes and just listened. I didn't think of anything. I just heard. The sound of leaves, the footstep of a child running, the distant noise of a dog playing with sticks. And there, at that moment, I understood the value that each sound has. Because when we lose something and then recover, we don't listen the same way. We listen with our soul. I was like that for a while. with my eyes closed, taking a deep breath. And there are people who think that starting over is making big changes. I learned that sometimes starting over is just listening again, with presence, with gratitude, with lightness. But that late afternoon, when I got home, still with my shirt smelling of sun and dry leaves, I found on the floor of the porch a brown envelope, without a sender. Inside it, a letter. And what was written there? I would change everything again. That evening, I sat down again on the porch, as I had done for so many years with Margaret. The orange light of the sun pierced the cracks in the railing and drew long lines on the wooden floor. It was that moment of the day when everything seems calmer, more true. The sounds around me, the rustling of trees, the barking of a distant dog, the chirping of a bird I hadn't heard in decades, were now my faithful companion. I held the letter I had found hours earlier, left anonymously on my doorstep. It wasn't Amanda's, it wasn't Derek's. It belonged to my eldest granddaughter, Clara. One page, written by hand, with trembling but sincere handwriting. She said that she heard a conversation between her mother and uncle days before, and that she always found it strange, the way Amanda talked about me. "Grandpa, I know Mommy wasn't fair to you. I don't understand everything yet, but I wanted to hear you. I want to hear it from your mouth." That was when I felt the weight of the silence that I myself carried. Because deep down, it wasn't just Amanda that I had let speak over the truth. It was the time, it was the guilt, it was the idea that in order to keep the peace, I had to swallow what hurt. But at that moment, with Clara's paper in my hands, I understood that maybe it was time to speak. I took my old notebook, the one I used to draw sketches of works when I was still an engineer, and started writing a letter. It was not a denunciation, nor a belated revenge. It was a report, my version, what I experienced, what I felt, and what I learned. It began with a phrase that came straight from my chest. "Don't let ambition erase decency." I talked about the days when I felt invisible inside my own home. From the moment I heard that first sentence from Amanda, thinking I was deaf, from the pain of recognizing that I was treated like a burden. But I also wrote about forgiveness, not for those who hurt me, but for myself, for allowing so much. Because sometimes the deepest betrayal does not come from outside. It comes from us, when we accept less than we deserve. As I was writing, I was reminded of Margaret, of the times when she would say with the calm of someone who sees what love blinds, "Richard, you treat her like a queen, but she sees you as a servant." And I, foolish with hope, thought it was just a phase, but it wasn't. Margaret saw far away. I stood there for a while looking at the sky, holding the pen, and said in a low voice, "You have always seen better than me, honey." At that moment, it wasn't anger I felt, nor sorrow. It was lucidity. It was as if for the first time I had heard everything with a clean heart. And there's one thing I want to say to those who are listening to me so far. Sometimes we take a long time to listen, but when you really listen, never forget the sound. If my story is anything to go by, let it be to remind you of this. Your kindness has never been weakness. She was his choice. And if one day this choice is trampled on, betrayed, forgotten, you can still choose again, for you. I kept Clara's letter in an envelope with my name on it and wrote, "Reply," in the corner. And I left my letter ready, there on the living room table. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, the truth, when it comes, does not need to raise its voice. It just needs to be said. But before you send that letter, I still had one last visit that I needed to make. An ancient promise that I had left silent for far too long. On a sunny Saturday, Eric arrived with the kids, bringing apple cake and laughter that filled the house again, as if time had gone back just a little bit, just to leave everything in the right place. The kitchen was filled with voices, the smell of fresh coffee, and even Margaret's old radio, which I had quietly repaired weeks ago, was playing one of those songs that you feel in your chest. The house breathed. Eric hugged me tight before leaving and only said, "Now I understand everything, Dad." I didn't have to answer. Sometimes silence says more than 1,000 excuses. When night fell, I walked slowly to the back of the yard. I sat on the rock where Margaret was stirring the lavenders, the ones she said kept the smell of calm. I looked up at the copper-colored sky and said softly, "She's gone, but I don't." And for the first time in a long time, that I sounded whole to me. It rang true to me. Amanda and Derek disappeared from the map. I heard that they tried to start over in some city in California, but I don't care about knowing. What matters is that their plan did not succeed, but mine worked. And it wasn't with shouting or fighting, it was with listening, with patience, and with every calculated step of a man who learned that dignity is not begged for, it is built. No, life speaks, and sometimes she screams. But when we learn to listen, really, with a clean heart, the most beautiful sound that exists is that of peace itself. That was the most precious lesson I took away from it all. Never let the love you feel for others silence the respect you owe yourself. To be good is not to be silly. It's choosing to keep the light on, even when others try to turn it off. And if there's one thing I can say by looking into your eyes right now, it's that it's still worth being light. Even when everything around seems dark. If you have stayed with me so far, thank you very much. Really, it was an outburst, it was a hug, it was a healing. And if this piece of my story touched your heart in any way, so it was worth living every line. If you can, leave a like there. It's like a silent hug that tells me, I'm with you, Richard. And if you want to come back for another coffee, another tale of life as it is, subscribe here to the channel. This little corner here is ours. Right here in the comments of which city you are listening to me. It is beautiful to know where each attentive ear comes from, each soul that understands the strength of a story. And it activates the bell, okay? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.